Hello, welcome to our final forum of the 2020 election season. I'm Miguel. I am Florida Today's engagement editor, and I will be hosting today's forum, which will cover the race for Brevard County Sheriff. By the way, Florida Today is organizing this forum in partnership with Eastern Florida State College. The incumbent in the race for Brevard County Sheriff, Wayne Ivey, has declined our invitation to participate in today's forum. However, his Democratic opponent, Alton Edmond, has agreed to be with us today. Welcome, Mr. Edmond.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being with us. And so just because we have one candidate instead of two, we'll actually have a shorter forum today. We usually go for about 56 minutes, but today we're going to stop at roughly 28 minutes, so just so you know. And Mr. Edmond will have 2 minutes to answer my questions, and he will begin first with an opening statement. The floor is yours.
Excellent. I'm so thankful for the opportunity to run for Brevard County Sheriff, and I just want to thank Florida Today as well as Eastern Florida for putting together this event. I don't take for granted the hours and resources that went into making this event possible. And the least that I could do is show up for the people of Brevard County. I'm looking forward to a sheriff department led by a sheriff that holds the values of accountability, transparency, and civility at its core. Because many young people around the world grew up like I did, with a very poor view of law enforcement. And like I did, many only saw law enforcement in their communities when they were there to arrest someone that they cared about. And that's not really a good way for people to grow up thinking and viewing law enforcement. I'm thankful that my mom worked for the Hendry County Sheriff's Department and changed my views. And later, Deputy Woody Clark, my school resource officer, helped to build a positive rapport with me and to show me really what community policing was all about. And so today I'm here as a candidate for Brevard County Sheriff so that we can bring a better community policing model centered around accountability, transparency, and civility to Brevard County. Thank you again for the opportunity.
So let's begin with my questions. And the first one is, you're running for sheriff in one of the 12 largest counties in the state of Florida. You have no experience in law enforcement and you're not a law enforcement officer. So how can you assure voters that you're ready for this job?
My experience is not traditional law enforcement experience, but I have worked at prosecutor's office over in Orange County, and I've worked alongside law enforcement to make sure that justice was served. My bachelor's degree is in criminology, and I've done plenty of ride-alongs and have learned the ins and outs of the criminal justice system. And as an attorney, I've had the opportunity to see the criminal justice system from both sides, as the prosecutor, from the prosecutorial standpoint, as well as from the defense standpoint. And as a result, I've developed an understanding, a deep understanding of the overall system and how it works and how the different pieces of it play together. Many people in law enforcement don't have that holistic view and perspective of law enforcement. And so I think that where I lack experience in some areas is made up for in other areas. Not only that, but I'm also a business owner. And I use that business experience every day to help me to better manage the way that business is done. And moving forward as your sheriff, I would use that business experience as well to manage the office of Brevard County Sheriff.
When you talk about business experience, I assume you're referring, you have your own law firm and a motivational speaking company, correct?
Absolutely.
And so I'm actually curious to know, why did you decide to run for sheriff? I believe you filed to run. I was very close to the deadline to qualify for this race, and you're obviously, I think you will agree with me that you are the underdog in this race. It's a very Republican county. This is a countywide race, which is very difficult to run because we are a very large county, like I said. So why did you run in this? Why did you decide to run? And really, what do you think your chances are of winning?
I decided to run because since I've been serving Brevard County, I have family here in Brevard that has been here for generations, but I've been serving Brevard County since 2013. And I've been watching the sheriff at work. I've been watching the way that he does business. And I see many flaws in that and ways that we can improve it. And for me, it's important, and I believe it's my duty as a citizen of Brevard County to do everything I can to try to make my county better. And now is the time for change as it relates to Brevard County Sheriff role. In terms of my chances, I think that my chances are a lot better than some people might think, because there are a lot of people, especially Republicans in this red county, that disagree with the way that my opponent does business as well. I'm a fiscal conservative, but my opponent is not. Although a Republican, there are many pieces of the Republican platform and traditional way of doing business that my opponent has strayed away from. And there are many Republicans that will be voting for me because I am a fiscal conservative. And I do not believe in politicalizing the office of sheriff. As sheriff, I don't think it really matters when someone calls 911, whether the person that responds to the call is Republican or Democrat. People just want to know that someone is coming and that their issue is going to be resolved. And so this really shouldn't even be a partisan race. But my opponent has done everything in his power to politicalize the office of sheriff and really to take away from what the office of sheriff really is about, and that is public safety and keeping people at peace here in Brevard County.
By the way, we wish Sheriff Ivey was here with us. We, like I said in the beginning, we did invite him to join today's forum. He said he would not participate in a forum with Florida today. But Mr. Edmond, you said that you are fiscal conservative. You said that your opponent is not. Could you expand on that?
Well, when we look at the history of the current sheriff and my opponent, we see that he is asked for more and more money, busting the cap over and over again, and that's the tax cap, taking more and more money away from taxpayer dollars. And when we see that in practice, there are many issues with that. If people look closely, they'll see that even the current clerk of courts, who is not run for re-election, Scott Ellis, is suing the county because of the way that the sheriff has been allowed to increase his budget and take away from other essential functions of the county in the process. And that's something that many taxpaying citizens here in Brevard County have an issue with, and myself. If we have a $136.11 million budget and it's used properly, I believe that there's less opportunity and less need to have to bust the cap over and over again. And when we look at what our sheriff has done in terms of travel, in terms of the purchases that he's made over time, then it's clear that it's really not necessary, and it's really a mismanagement of taxpayer dollars that has led to continued requests for an increased budget. And I'm someone that's looking to change that. And what you mentioned, the topic of my opponent not showing up because of this being a Florida Today debate. But I do want to make clear that there was another debate scheduled by the Association of Women Lawyers, and my opponent backed out. He committed and then backed out from that debate as well. There was also a debate scheduled by the Brevard Space Coast Democratic Black Caucus that my opponent also declined to debate me in as well. And so there have been 3 separate occasions in which my opponent has refused to debate me, and 2 of those had nothing to do with Florida Today.
And you mentioned the vote last year by the county commission, and let's give a little bit of background. When Sheriff Ivey went before the commission, he asked for the cap to be raised, and it applies to only a certain portion of his budget, by the way, because he needed to fund critical needs within his office. And he was talking about better pay for deputies. He was talking about equipment. He was talking about cars. Newer cars for his deputies, all of these things that I think play a lot into boosting morale for deputies. I mean, how would you have gone about that? Because it seems like from what you said that you're against what the county commission did. So how would you go about funding these? I think a lot of people will say these are indeed very critical needs that, need to be funded in a law enforcement agency.
Some of those needs may indeed be critical needs, but those needs were seen as a requirement by the same sheriff that travels around the state of Florida and travels to different parts of the country on taxpayer dime, so that he can hang out with other politicians that he's friends with. And so when we consider the money that he's been spending on travel and the things that he's been doing outside of the scope of Brevard County Sheriff and that are not related to the office of sheriff. Maybe if he cut back on some of that additional spending that's not related to keeping Brevard County citizens safe, there would be less need to request more taxpayer money from, to be included or added to his budget. And so again, I think it's important to trim the fat before you try and ask for more taxpayer dollars. And many taxpayers here in Brevard feel the same way.
And just to have this on the record, when you talk about trips the sheriff has taken, could you give us examples of what you mean?
There have been different trips to Washington, D.C. for the Sheriff's Association events. Even a month or so ago, when on the eve of a hurricane supposedly touching down here in Brevard County, our sheriff was in Tampa with the president instead of here in Brevard County serving the citizens of Brevard County. And there have been many trips like that where the sheriff has traveled around the state of Florida to be with the governor and to be with the president and to meet with other politicians about things that are not related to Brevard County and Brevard County safety. And if you're going to be the sheriff of Brevard County, it's important to invest in Brevard County instead of investing in increasing your own profile and investing in the politics of the office instead of the safety and security of the people of Brevard County.
And do you know for a fact these were paid for by taxpayer dollars, or is there a chance that these could have come out of his own pocket if these were trips that seem to be political or campaigning for another person?
It's certainly possible that they could have come from private sources. However, we're unable to confirm that because when I requested the specifics as to the travel budget, the invoice that was sent to me was over $15,000 to receive information on the sheriff's travel. And so those were things that I wanted to verify in terms of those different trips that were taken. How were they paid for? Different flights, first class flights to DC and things like that. Those are things that the sheriff should be accountable to taxpaying citizens for. But unfortunately, there's no accountability because that budget that is made up of taxpayer dollars, part of that being my dollars as a taxpayer here in Brevard, is not one that is easily obtained. And as a result, that can't be confirmed. But at this time, the sheriff has an opportunity to release that budget and hasn't, so that taxpayers can really have an answer to these questions.
And I think, when we're talking about law enforcement and somebody running for sheriff, I think the number one question on the minds of many voters, at least, is how will you keep us safe and lower crime rates, in particular property crimes and violent crimes? What is your plan to make sure that crime stays lower in Brevard County?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. One, I think that there are some things, some strategies that we can continue to use. At the end of the day, I'm not looking to scrap the way that the sheriff's office does business completely. When it comes to property crimes, when it comes to security, we want to make sure that we keep making arrests. We want to make sure that we keep patrolling neighborhoods and communities. But I want to increase the focus on community policing because as we've noticed, and as you can see when we look at the trends, many of the perpetrators of different crimes here in Brevard County are younger people. And when we have community policing and we build relationships with young people, maybe we can mentor them and help them to choose different paths so that we can make our communities safer. Maybe we can help to lead people that are released from jail to resources so that they don't feel obligated to continue a life of crime and criminal activity. And all of those endeavors could keep our community safe. There are programs that I partner with right now already as a private citizen. For example, I'm on the board for Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and there's a program called Bigs with Badges, where law enforcement officers and deputies could be paired up with young people, at-risk youth in the community. And those youths could have opportunities to really learn and be developed from law enforcement professional mentors. And I think many of them would choose different paths if they had those opportunities. Unfortunately, our sheriff has had an opportunity to cooperate and participate with the Bigs with Badges program and declined to do so. And so those are different programs that I would love to invest in. Also, Hey Blue, is another initiative that pairs up law enforcement officers with young people, even at the kindergarten and pre-K level, so that they can begin to have positive interactions with law enforcement.
Okay, and I want to bring up something that I know it has come up during this campaign season, is that you were fired from the public defender's office in 2017 after 3 incidents. In one incident, you left your loaded gun on your desk as you rushed to get to court. You also were admonished for wearing a Black Lives Matter necktie to work, and you secretly recorded a conversation that your fellow attorneys were having about politics during a work event and live streamed it on Facebook. You were filming yourself and their voices could be heard in the background. Could you address your firing and explain what happened, and if you have anything else to add?
Just very briefly, I find it interesting that my former employer would say that they were just discussing politics. That was part of the discussion, but another part of the discussion was when coworkers of mine and other people at that event were talking about blowing up DC to get rid of Democrats. And that conversation at a gun range when people had guns made me feel uneasy. And so that's part of the reason why I recorded myself just for safety, because it was a very uncomfortable situation to be in. And when it relates to the gun, I do have a license to carry a weapon. I carry that weapon with me to my office today, and I carried that weapon to work with me at the PD's office. I left that gun on my desk in my office, my private office space that was not a shared space. I closed the door to that office and I went to court. And my weapon would not have been discovered had someone not come into my office without my authorization while I was in court. And so, that situation has really been misrepresented by my former employer. Unfortunately, integrity is something that's rare these days. But it's important to consider my private office space and the sanctity of that, and how someone else violated my space to find my weapon. And that's really what led to that situation. And so, really that was really blown out of proportion and used in a way to try to discredit me, when in fact, my weapon wasn't in an area that was accessible to other people or public. It was a private, personal space where I kept my things and no one else's things were housed. And I learned from that situation. And today, I'm a business owner and am very active in the community as a result of moving forward into entrepreneurship. So I'm thankful for that.
Okay, and this also has come up during this campaign, so I would like for you to address this. Back in June, you wrote a now deleted post on social media regarding recent violence at protests that read, in part, quote, "Do I want looting and violence? No. Is it sometimes a necessary evil? Yes," end quote. You have received quite a bit of criticism because of that. Could you please address why you wrote that post and what did you mean by it?
First and foremost, most of the people that criticize me about that post skip over the first part that you read. Do I want violence and looting? I said unequivocally, no. And that remains my position and will continue to be my position. And in fact, in my time here in Brevard County, I have been nothing but a peaceful person in terms of the different gatherings and the different demonstrations that I've helped to plan. Each and every one of them has been peaceful. There was a justice demonstration in the beginning of June that went from Rockledge to Cocoa. And there were an estimated between 3,000 and 5,000 people there at that march. I was one of the primary organizers for that event. And you know what? With 3,000 to 5,000 people marching down Fisk Boulevard from Rockledge to Cocoa, there was not $1 in damage to anyone's property. There was not one act of violence. And there was not one instance of looting or stolen property. And so, that context is really important when you consider who I am and what I've done here in Brevard County and my history of nonviolence and peaceful protest when necessary and peaceful activism when necessary.
And now let's talk about police reform, which is obviously a very discussed topic today in the United States, but you have talked about it in your campaign as well. And I want to hear, and I believe you have pointed to Volusia County, at least in a couple of interviews with Florida Today. What specific reforms do you have in mind for Brevard County?
There are a few different ideas for reform. First and foremost, I really admire Sheriff Chitwood over in Volusia County, even from the way that his deputies are trained, because many deputies around our nation are trained to be warriors when they do their jobs. In fact, Sheriff Chitwood trains his deputies to be guardians of the community. And I think that's very important because the average stop, the type of interactions that law enforcement have with citizens in the community most often are domestic disputes between cohorts and companions and roommates, as well as traffic infractions. And so when we consider that most interactions with the public are in those two contexts, it's very unlikely that a warrior mentality is necessary. And most often, you need that guardian perspective just to make sure that the situation is under control and that people are safe, and that there's a de-escalation and a fair process, really. And so when we consider the way that law enforcement officers are trained, even from the very core, that needs to change. But there are also other simple things that we can change here in Brevard County to make Brevard County safer and better for everyone. We can ban vascular neck restraints. And on May 25th, we saw a terrible tragedy as it related to, a situation that happened up in Minnesota. And so that's something that we can do right away, and it wouldn't cost the taxpayers a dime to do that. In terms of including a duty to report or intervene, that's something that wouldn't cost taxpayers a dime. And basically, it would hold deputies to a standard to intervene when they see a fellow deputy doing something that is a policy and that puts a tax-paying citizen
Let's move on to the next. And it's like you brought up neck restraints. I thought the sheriff actually stopped using that, and he allows it in very specific occasions. But are we talking about the same thing?
We are. So at first, right after the George Floyd situation in May, the sheriff doubled down and said that we will keep vascular neck restraints in our tool belt. And then after I decided to run for sheriff and announce my candidacy, he decided to backpedal and to say that that he would restrict the manner in which vascular neck restraints can be used.
All right, I just wanted to clarify. And by the way, the sheriff, as you can tell, is not in this forum today with us. He declined our invitation. We did invite this, but we appreciate Mr. Edmond being here with us. And then my follow-up question is kind of a very similar and along the same lines. But you have been very critical of Sheriff Ivey's task force to curb new levels of youth gun violence in Brevard County. The sheriff's office has said the initiative has led to arrests and increased cooperation among law enforcement agencies and the community. What is your plan to address this issue?
Well, one, that's a very generalized and vague response that has led to arrest. Well, what arrest? And how can they verify that those arrests were due to the task force and not due to other endeavors? I'd like to see more specifics from the sheriff in terms of how that task force operates, and in terms of what the results are. The bottom line is my main criticism was that the task force, as it was explained by the sheriff, really would put an emphasis on searching and patting down and basically all the different things that were an issue in New York when it came to stop and frisk. It would increase the emphasis on harassing potentially law-abiding citizens. It would increase the emphasis on sending children to prison, and it would increase the emphasis on making arrests. But the problem with that is that measure is a very reactionary measure. When we consider an arrest after someone has been a part of gun violence, a person is already gone. A life is already lost. The community has already been scarred. And so I think that we need to be proactive, more proactive in our efforts. And while we do need to make arrests, and that is necessary, and I absolutely believe in making arrests when people do violence and commit crimes, I think it's important to invest in our community and build those community relationships, and partnering with youth programs and partnering with these different agencies that want to help and keep young people out of the streets and away from guns. Because those are things that can prevent young people from shooting people and being involved in gun violence in the first place. And that's where I want to be. I want to be a leader that leads proactively to prevent crime and not reactively to the crimes after they've already occurred.
And I think it makes me think of community policing. As you know, there's been renewed calls for more community policing after the deaths of George Floyd and others. Do you agree? Do you think that Brevard County needs more community policing? And if so, if elected, how would you put all of that in place, especially in an agency as large as Brevard County?
Brevard County absolutely needs more community policing. And one way that I would put that into play is to require that incoming deputies that are beginning a career at BCSO participate in these youth-centered activities that involve working with and mentoring young people. And so when we have incoming deputies, many of them that come from other places and move here, they can become more acquainted with Brevard County and the different people in Brevard County by mentoring youth and participating in these programs. Not only that, but these young people have mentors and can be able to choose better paths as a result of having these mentors that are looking to direct them and help them to grow and to learn from them.
All right, I wish we had more time to do more questions, but we're actually hitting where it's 27, 28 minutes. This is now time for your closing statement. I'll ask you to keep it at roughly a minute, if you can. I know you probably still have a lot to say.
I'll be very brief. First and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to participate. Thank you to the people of Brevard that wanted answers to these different questions and that hopefully received those answers to their questions. I apologize on behalf of my opponent for those that wanted those questions answered and who our sheriff did not respond to the call for. And I just want to make sure that we have a Brevard County Sheriff that focuses on transparency, accountability, and civility, as well as community policing to help our streets to be safer, to help our children to be safer. Thank you.
And that was Democrat Alton Edmond. He's running against the incumbent in this race, Wayne Ivey, who declined our invitation to attend today's forum. I want to thank you for watching, and I want to thank Mr. Edmond for being here today with me. Again, the election is on November 3rd. Make sure you vote.